Hi, and welcome. You're listening to the Get Into Your Skin podcast, where we talk anything and everything skincare and mental health. Each week, we will explore inner and outer beauty at the intersection of a medically informed point of view and the curiosity of a skincare amateur. Speaking of which, I am one of your hosts, Isabel and Kumar, here to ask the questions you, the audience, might have, especially the dumb questions you might be too embarrassed to ask your dermatologist or have Googled countless of times, only to end up more confused than before you opened up your browser. This is our very first episode, which is very exciting. And I'm excited to introduce my co-host, Dr. Kumar Nadan, a medical doctor currently completing his dermatology residency in Chicago. He is a San Francisco native, a board member of the Chicago Dermatology Society, and an avid researcher in skin of color. Thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me. Super excited. I've been looking forward to this all week, and I'm glad that we're finally able to do it.
Yeah. Let's talk about why this podcast even started before we talk about our backgrounds, which we will do. Yeah. I know you because you are really great friends of my sister's soon-to-be husband. Is that
correct? That is absolutely correct. Yeah, that's how I see it from the other end. My good childhood friend Andrew is getting married to your sister very soon, and I'm very excited for that as well. And you and I have crossed paths many times in the same social circle, and we've never interacted, I think, longer than
lots
2 minutes.
Lots of house parties, pass me a White Claw.
Yes. Yeah. Lots of nice times and lots of smiles, but no conversation.
Yeah. And we started talking skincare because my sister obviously texts you. And whenever I had a question, I would text her and be like, can you text Kumar and ask if, I should put on retinol when my face is dry, or does this work? Does that not work? And she's like, why don't I just give you his number and then you can start talking. And then from there, we decided hey, let's do a podcast because I'm sure I'm not the only one with these questions.
Yeah, absolutely not. And also your questions kept me on my toes. I think there's a lot of things that I peripherally heard of and I wasn't sure if people are using them. And then you'd ask me about it and I'd read into it and I'd ask around my colleagues. And so I learned a lot too. So that was actually really nice.
I do wonder that now that I was reading an article in the New York about how the language of therapy has become really popular in our daily conversations. And that's a result of people becoming more knowledgeable. But there is sort of more knowledge on skincare, which again, sometimes you can look on the internet and find the response that you want, basically. So it's I wonder if people come in just knowing what's vitamin C serum and blah, blah, blah.
Yeah, I think it's a double-edged sword. I think it's absolutely incredible that there's a language out there for skincare. It's developing rapidly. Everyone's involved. Everyone has a voice in this language, and we're creating it together. So I think that's so fantastic because we need that in order to move faster and get people to their goals. I think the other part of that sword is that, a lot of my patients, they come in and they ask, what does this serum do? Can I use this? Can I use this? And that is all wonderful. But a lot of this stuff is experimental where, as this is developing, nobody knows the answers to everything. And so it's tough to say. And I think if you look long enough on Google, you will find the answers you want. But that may not always be the best answers.
Yeah, the democratization, that's a word, of skincare. Yeah. No, I remember when the little gummies that were for skin and nails came out, and then everyone was doing it, and then everyone started breaking out, and it's okay, let's just talk to our doctors. But okay, I'm going to talk about how I got into skincare, and it basically started when the pandemic, which I guess it turned 1 year old, at least for people in the US. We started being locked up a year ago, and there was a feeling, A, that everything in our lives was out of control, B, that the days just became you wake up and you don't have to go to work, but you have to do work. So do you shower? Do you do breakfast in bed because you're sad that you can't go outside? And then the routines that I established started to really help me, especially in the morning. It became okay, wake up, while I do the coffee, I wash my face. And then at night, so it wasn't just oh, I drank so much wine, I'm in bed. It's oh, okay, now I wash my face. Now I do this. Now I moisturize. And talking to a friend who was into skincare beforehand, and he always is glowing on his IG, he started telling me like do vitamin C, telling me to apply SPF every day, which my dermatologist had told me a couple years before. And I was like, I don't go outside. I was a graduate student at the time. And he was like, well, do you have windows? Because that means you need it. And I was like, honestly, it was a little rude, but I get it now. I reapply it in the middle of the day. um, but let's talk about you. So you are currently finishing up your dermatology residency.
Yes, yes, I am. And before I chat about me, I think what you mentioned about the pandemic stuff, I definitely want to touch on that. I think it's absolutely nuts that it was a year ago that we started all this. And routines are so important to all of our lives, not just in skincare, but in everything we do. And it reminds us what we're doing matters, and how we take care of ourselves matters. And even if you don't have to go into work, you're still, you get up for you and you do your routines for you, and to make yourself a better person, and for you to work on other things, and you can maintain your skin and your health. So it sets you up to enjoy the rest of life. So I think that's wonderful that you made it a part of your routine and you're
Yeah, for
figuring
me it
it
was
out.
like a solid barrier between I'm waking up and like scrolling on Twitter for 2 hours to like now it's the day because like now my face is like it's ready for it.
You're ready. Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. Yeah, you can prepare yourself physically, and then mentally and emotionally you can follow. And I think that's really cool. There's mirror neurons, where I always loved learning about in school, and it's not in dermatology, but in neurology. There's mirror neurons in our brain that if you see yourself smile enough, or if you see other people smile enough, then you will start becoming happier. And we usually think that an emotion happens first, and then you smile because you're happy, but you can actually reverse it. And it's the same thing with anything that calms you down, right? You can do something calming and then you feel more calm. And that goes for skincare as well. And I think it translates over to your skin. So
Or the
yeah. And
opposite. I remember when I first started taking ADHD medication and I felt like the heart was like my body feels like I'm being chased by a zebra, so now I'm anxious. So it's like it goes, yeah. You need to choose what reactions you make your body feel because then it's like, okay, if I put on like a cool jade roller, which we'll talk about eventually, then that's something else. Is if you're just like, let me just pour this coffee down my throat and like, yeah.
yeah, yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I have an aunt, she does complementary medicine. I think is insanely interesting. And I practice Western medicine classically. Um, but in complementary medicine, there's a theory that when you wake up, you should drink hot liquids first rather than eat a cold meal, because your gut has been cold for the entire time you've been sleeping. So you need to warm it up. And liquid is easier than solid foods to digest. So you do liquids first, and hot warms everything up, just like you warm up before you work out. And so you do hot coffee or hot tea before you do your yogurt and granola, which is a common breakfast meal here, but very difficult to digest per the theory. And I think it's very interesting. And I personally drink a lot of tea, and I think, why not? I think it is worth trying.
Yeah, I'm gonna try it for sure.
Yeah, absolutely worth trying. Yeah.
Okay.
And then you asked about me. I will you went through some of what I've done, which is great, and it always sounds weird listening to it, because I think end of the day I see myself as a human, and I start myself off like that, and every day, and then the titles show up in the middle of the day when you're working a lot, and it feels odd. But that is the field that I'm in, and that's part of the whole deal. And so I grew up in California, grew up in San Francisco, went to school in LA, and then went out to the East Coast for medical school. And then now I'm in Chicago. So I've been all over the country, and everyone's been very welcoming, and I love exploring. And now I'm in dermatology here doing my residency, and I did a fellowship in skin of color. And so I've been doing skin of color research and working with skin of color patients for about 5 years now. And my practice here in Chicago is, I would say, 80 to 90% skin of color.
Okay.
I would say 80, 90% skin of color easily. I think 80% American skin of color.
Wait, say that again.
I would say the majority of the people I work with are skin of color, and the majority of that is American, but I have a
Okay.
lot of skin of color from Africa,
Okay.
Asia, and so it's a big mix.
I was like, wait, there's other countries? I'm
Yeah.
kidding. No, yeah, totally. Okay. And so you're currently finished up the residency, which means you work in what type of setting?
I am working in a hospital setting, all outpatient. So I just work in clinic for most of my days. There's some months where I do surgery rotations, there's some months where I do consults in the hospital. But most of my days is filled with seeing patients who come in that day, like you would go to a dermatologist and comes in with their skin problem, and I see them that day, and then I'll see them back for follow-ups.
Hmm.
And I
Okay.
mean, yeah.
Yeah. Um, and like just thinking about the population that you serve, because like I know what I've gone to a dermatologist, and as an adult now, I just go in and like have my concerns, talk to them, then they send me on their way. And like it was the last time I went, it was like I just wanted the retin-A prescription. So I feel like I just went in and was like, this can I have this? And they're like, yeah, okay, bye. So I'm just wondering if like what you see on a day-to-day basis is like similar to that. Is it just people being like, I want to glow more? Or is it like more serious problems?
Yeah, that's a great question. It's a mix. My practice is definitely a mix. The majority, um, the bread and butter is acne, which a lot of people come in for, I think, in our world, socially. And then in terms of this population, it's acne, psoriasis, and eczema are a big three. And eczema and psoriasis are chronic conditions, much like acne, which plague you beyond just the physical manifestations. It also has an appearance that is bothersome, and it could be very itchy and symptomatic, which is also very bothersome. And those are so stubborn often to get rid of, and so that is a huge part of the population. And then there'll be skin cancer, of course, and there's some other conditions that really vary. The population that I work with is underserved, 95% uninsured. There are a lot of diseases that you see in third world countries or second world countries that you wouldn't expect to see in the US, but they show up because a lot of these patients, they don't have access to care, and they have gone without seeing a doctor or any type of provider for years and years and years. And they've had other stressors in their life that take up importance, right? Their family, their jobs, everything else they need to do to survive. And so getting to a dermatologist is very difficult for the population. So they come in with very advanced, tough disease to treat. And so the practice is, it keeps you on your toes because every day is like opening up a textbook, and you'll see things that nobody else gets a chance to see. And then there are also patients who come in for a glow up, and those are fun as well. And that has its own set of problems that you deal with.
Okay, I have a lot of questions based on what you said, but so I know we're gonna eventually do like a whole episode on a lot of these topics, especially acne. But just what's the difference between psoriasis and eczema? Because I in my brain I just like kind of don't I can't pinpoint.
Yeah, very, very good question. So I think if you have met a lot of people with a skin condition that they're annoyed by, it's usually eczema. It is something that you've dealt with as a kid. Oftentimes you have allergies and asthma associated with eczema, very itchy, and it's called an itch that rashes in the derm world because it's so itchy, and then you scratch it and then you get a rash afterwards. And it could be on your elbows and on the back of your knees. It could be on your face, especially as a kid. And as you get older, oftentimes you grow out of it. But a lot of people during the winter, they still get itchy, dry skin. So when you think of that itchy, dry skin, you're thinking eczema. Psoriasis has a very unique appearance to it. It's thick and pink. It's almost like my shirt. It's just so it's more pink than my shirt, but it's just so salient, and it's on top of the skin. It's this thick plaque, and then it has flaking on top of it. And so psoriasis can itch as well, and it can be very bothersome. It can make you miserable, and it can cover the whole body. And so psoriasis is something that a lot of people deal with. I think between the two, they cover over 20-30% of the US population. So
Oh wow.
you're pretty much everyone's going to deal with some type of skin problem at some point or another.
Yeah, that's wild. And I mean, I can imagine like I haven't dealt with acne, but I know my sister does, and it's just like even I mean, even when I have like a pimple, it's like something that becomes like a scarlet letter. You're like, how do I cover this up? So I can't imagine having something that's like spreading to other parts of your body. Like you can probably not, but you feel like everyone's like looking at you or watching you or, like not knowing what that is.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And it goes back to what you mentioned when we started talking today is that we want to cover skincare and mental health. I think you have a huge interest in mental health, which I want to hear more about. And I do as well. And the cross section of those two is not talked about enough. And I think those two are two of the most popular topics right now in our society, right? And in on social media and amongst my friends and patient population, they're so intertwined because when you have a skin condition, one, it is a manifestation of your stress, as whether that stress is physical, emotional, psychological, I do not know. But I do know that I can see your skin is very stressed out when if you come see me and you have an eczema or psoriasis or acne that's out of control. It could even be nutritional. It's hard to pinpoint and it's different. It's a different mix for every person. But the worst part about that manifestation of stress is that it causes you more stress. And then you're in this vicious cycle. It's like anxiety, right? You're worried about being worried and it gets out of control. And so if you look at atopic dermatitis, which is within eczema, you have a 35% increased risk of committing suicide or attempting suicide. And that is absolutely nuts that a skin condition can drive you to that, but it really makes a difference, right? Acne, we know that increases the rate of depression, increases the rate of suicide attempts, increases the rate of bullying. We know that eczema and psoriasis take up 15 to 20 hours of a parent's time trying to take care of their kid, moisturize them, bathe them properly, make sure that they're not scratching themselves out of sleep every night. It is stressful, straining, and we cannot quantify the amount that it takes away from our lives for a huge portion of the population.
That's that's wild. I wonder, because you as a dermatologist, you come in knowing this, right? That like, let's talk about why this is showing up. What are your stresses? In your experience, do these psychiatrists like who work in the same hospital, like, do they also ask like, hey, like what's going on with the skin connection? Because this is just happened, so we haven't talked about it, but I'm on antidepressants. They're Fibrid, and I've been on it for I think a whole year, so they're kind of working, but not super great. And so I got started on Lamictal, which is a mood stabilizer. It's usually given to people with bipolar, but basically, if you're depressed and you're like, your mood is always like maybe lower than most people, but steadily, and sometimes it goes like boom, takes it's a valley, right? So what the mood
Mhm.
stabilizer does is kind of like make that low not be super low. So yeah, you'll feel kind of like shit, but it won't be that shitty. So this was like a good medication to take, but truly, and I know my skin pretty well. I look at myself all day. Not a lot of people around here, quarantine, but truly, I took it for 3 days and started breaking out in a way that had never happened. And it wasn't like, because sometimes if you're on your period or you're eating something greasy, like, okay. But this was like, no. And then I stopped taking it after a week, saw them go away. And like when I talked to my psychiatrist about it, she was like, oh, yeah, like, that can happen. But like, let's talk about the pros and cons. I'm like, okay, that was dismissed super fast. Like, I made the decision to not take it anymore. I'm like, let's find another one. And obviously, with any medication that can have side effects, there's with Abilify, you can gain weight, and like to me, it's like I'd rather gain weight and be happy. But for some reason, it's like no, I don't want the acne on my face. So I just think that like this psychiatrist, I haven't dealt with other ones in this case, but like did not register that it was a big deal.
Yeah, yeah, that's a great point. That's great. And I think your experience is special to you, and I think it is a great learning experience for you and for everyone else that gets to hear about it. But it's something that is not uncommon
Mhm.
in terms of what people experience, and it is so difficult, right? I think for a couple reasons. One, I think different fields of medicine do not communicate with each other as much as they should. I think we've created these specialists and they are so wonderfully trained and they're smart, but there's so much information to learn that they cannot also learn another specialty. And you have primary care doctors who handle so much information and they're incredible for it. And I applaud them and I've tried it before, and it's difficult work. But to be able to keep track of all these medications is so tough, and I think that's where we get lost in the weeds, because any medication you take, like you said, there are side effects. These pills, they are manufactured, they're strong, they're meant to do a lot of work in the body, but it's like signing a deal with the devil with some of these pills, right? It's you can fix what you are asking for, but you don't know what else you're going to lose,
Yeah,
and
it's
that
like
can
that
make
movie
things worse.
Bedazzled with Brendan Fraser, where all of his wishes just get fucked up because it's the devil, and it's like, yeah, I'm happy now, but I've gained a bunch of weight, and like, do you stay or do you go?
Yeah, I
Yeah.
guess you. Yeah, it's the jolly. You know, when we start a lot of these medications, there's a couple things I think that we should think about. One is a lot of these medications we have come to accept that we're going to be on them for life, which I do not think is the point of a pill. And I think a lot of people in medicine would agree with me, but I don't know if that would change the way they practice, because how do you change it? Because these pills are so good that it can allow you to continue your lifestyle, whatever that was that caused you to get to that point. It can allow you to continue that, and this will be a crutch,
Yeah. No,
and
I mean,
you never have to go fix
100%,
it.
100%. I also do therapy. We love Sharon. She's the best. I see her once a week. But because I obviously when you start saying I'm going to take a pill for the rest of my life, which is what kind of antidepressants are. And of course, I am a person who will put on the tinfoil cap sometimes and be like, well, obviously these companies, like pharmaceutical companies, made a pill that you have to take every single day for the rest of your life, or you will go through awful withdrawals, that will make you go back on it. And which is a thing, but also I'm very happy with my antidepressants. I'm also aware that a lot of depression can treatment resistant depression, you can be good on antidepressants and then your brain chemistry is like, I'm used to this. Like, we're sad again. And you have to switch them up. So it's like, even if you're like, okay, I want to take these pills for the rest of my life, there might come a time where you have to switch them up. So,
Absolutely. Your brain gets used to it. The body is incredible. The body is amazing. It'll adapt to whatever you throw at it.
yeah.
It'll adapt. And so if you throw pills at it, eventually your body will adapt to it. And we see that with even injectable medications that are biologics that are incredibly strong. The body can get used to it. And it's incredible to fathom because there's such well developed, researched, expensive drugs, but the body is invaluable. It's absolutely incredible. And so yeah, you're right. I mean, you do therapy, you work on yourself, you do things that fix the underlying issues that got you to a point where you sought help. And that is what the pills I think are meant to do, is to give you enough energy and to give you enough wiggle room so that you can work on yourself, and it'll be there to pick up the slack, and that because it's really tough and
Right.
exhausting. And so
Or showing up to the therapy appointment when you feel super low is not going to happen. So, like, okay, at least I can show up there and do that. I do have a question because, okay, basically, in my experience, it seems like common experience, psychiatrists don't really think about dermatological conditions. You guys obviously do because it's so linked and like so obviously linked. So when a patient shows up and you're like, okay, you have eczema, here's some treatment, but there's something that's stressing you out in your life. Do you just go like, you should figure out what that is? Like, how do you even treat something like that? You know what I mean?
that's a great question, and I'll say that my psychiatry colleagues, I absolutely adore them, because whenever I talk to them, they teach me so much, and so I feel like they have so much to work with that they probably know that things are linked, but they're not given the tools and the time to solve it, as most of us are not. As people, it doesn't seem to be enough time to work on ourselves. In derm, I will say that I cannot speak for my derm colleagues. I think that MDs, you are often taught that when people come in with a problem, you then solve it, and then you're done. But the way I practice, and if somebody comes in with eczema, is that I let them know that they have some type of stress that got them to this point. It opened up a door to this dark world that they are stuck in. And I will help manage the physical manifestations of that. So I think there's a stress and then there's a physical manifestation on the skin, and I will help manage this part as much as I can. I will calm the body down. I will tell the body through anti-inflammatory medications, often like topical steroids, that says, you're okay. There's nothing going on. You don't need to send all your defense mechanisms to the skin to cause damage to fight what you think is happening, right? And that is the job of the medicine. That is my job. The other job that is required in this two parts is yours, and that is to figure out what is causing you stress, whether it be emotional, whether it be psychological, you just went through a breakup, or it could be something physical, right? My good friend, she has eczema of her hands because she washes her hands all the time for surgery. And when you're washing your hands for surgery and you're scrubbing it in, you're using those chemicals, they're so harsh. And then you get inflamed, right? That breaks the skin. And then you get inflamed. And that's your body saying, uh-oh, there's a problem there. Let's go figure it out. Let's send everything we got. It doesn't know what the problem is, but it's sending everything. And now you're in the cycle of inflammation. And the inflammation is kind of like the body's anxiety in the skin. It's just freaking out. And you got to tell it to calm down at some point because you can't solve it. On top of the washing, then if you eat certain foods that make you inflamed, whatever those foods are for you, whether it be sugar, which is a common inflammatory marker, or it is dairy, which is a common inflammatory citing factor, those things make it worse. And so that's where you get into a slippery slope of, okay, I'm going to comfort myself by doing something else, but that makes it worse. Like, I'm going to go eat a bunch of chocolates, but then the chocolate makes it worse.
There's a
And
trade-off.
It's a trade-off.
I'm lactose intolerant, and sometimes I'm like, you know what? I will feel shitty for today because that was not a pun. I'm like, I'm craving cheese, and I've recently discovered lactate, but there's also like, I mean, even with like sugar, things like that, it's like that sometimes the stress of life is so hard that like comfort food is can be healing. And then yeah. Also, what you're talking about is like sometimes anxiety is like a condition that some of us have, but sometimes anxiety is something that shows up and tells you, hey, something's off with what's going on. We don't know what it is, but you feel it. So it seems like sometimes a rash or in like the itchiness is telling you, hey, this thing that you put in our body, we don't like it, like an allergy. Or I mean, I don't know how you help your friend because she needs to keep scrubbing it. But like there's just something that needs to be changed. I was gonna ask you about this later, but there must be some sort of like, oh, there's sort of this weird pollution in your home, or like you're being exposed to this or that, and like your body's telling you through your skin, like we need to change something. And that's like honestly sucks because like you're dealing with something that sucks, but it's also like helpful.
Absolutely. And that is a wonderful way to look at it. It is a signal that says you need a break. And the comfort foods like you talked about, or comfort behavior, it is very comforting. And that's the tough part, is I'm not going to sit here and say, don't eat chocolate. I'm not going to sit here and say, don't do the things that make you feel good, right? Because those are comforting, and I completely understand the need for them. And that's a decision that you got to make, right? If that is something that's hurting you, if that is something, it's like a bad relationship, right? It feels great at the time, but if you keep going back to that and it's toxic, at some point you have to figure out, what do you need to do to make yourself feel better in a month, in 2 months? And that is something that only every person can answer for themselves. I think that is where my job as a doctor stops. And I think that is, or as a dermatologist at least stops, I think that is where if a therapist can step in, or if I had that ability and more time to be a therapist for somebody, that is the next step, right? Is to fix those underlying things, get a routine that helps you, that makes you feel better, and to get you to that point where future you thanks you
Yeah.
for avoiding some stuff.
Yeah, it's this reminding me when I was younger, like pretty young, like 9 or 10, I had dandruff. And so we would go to the doctor, like get the shampoos, like blah 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 blah. The doctor was really sweet, like I was a child being like, right. But he was at one point he was like, okay, you need to wash this way, like this many times. And he was like, also, how good are your grades? I was like, they're great. They're like straight A's. I was in Mexico, so they were all tens. He was like, okay, so that needs to change. You need to not have straight A's because you're clearly very stressed out. And like that's making the dandruff show up. And I'm like, it's hard because you hear that. And obviously as a child, you're like, what? Doesn't
Yeah,
make sense. But even as an adult, someone were to tell me, okay, like you're doing great at your job, like you're volunteer, you're doing all these things, and then it's like now be less stressed so that this can be fixed. It's like, how do I do that? Like this is what? And it's such a hard instruction to get from a doctor. And like it's very real. It's like, yeah, I don't want the dandruff, but like I also want to have good grades. And it's like, okay, how do you even begin to do this work? Where it's like, yeah, that's up to the patient.
helps the patient. And I hope the doctor gives you some guidance. Probably a lot of it is what you just did, which is breathing, which is
Yeah.
just getting the breathing down and getting the meditation in and the yoga. And it is such a push and pull, right? You want to be so healthy, but at the same time, we're in a world that you can be very stressed out. Like you have to get the best grades and you have to get a great job and make a lot of money. And it's a very rat race kind of world that can suck you in, and before you know it, you're
Yeah.
in the loop.
And that's also a
Yeah.
very like middle class concern if you're talking about the patients that you
Hmm.
see who don't have health insurance. Like, okay, let me be less stressed out, but I have to work at Amazon where I have to not take, any type of breaks, or where I have to have two jobs. Some of them are serving people who treat you like shit to your face. And it's like, yeah, I can't. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And it's a completely different world. I think that's a whole, you bring up different jobs and how pressed they are for work. I have a lot of patients who come in, and we have the luxury right now. We're talking about glowing skin, and we're talking about looking pretty and in good jobs, and day-to-day stress that is first world problems and uh, middle class. But majority of my patients, they are struggling just to survive, right? They have multiple incomes. They are maybe one parent household. They have so little support in their lives that they are not set up for success. And so they are just chasing down all of the loose threads in their life. And their skin is not the priority, but the disease gets so bad, the conditions get so bad that they have to come in, and they get a chance to come in, and then you tell them, okay, you got to fix this, you got to decrease the stress. And it is easier said than done. And anytime I say that to somebody, I say, look, I'm going to say this, and I know how hard it is. But you got to find some way. You just got to find some way for yourself, not for anybody else, for yourself, so that you could be the best you, and then you could support all the people you need to support, including yourself. And I don't know what that stress is, and if there was a way that I could relieve it, I wish I could, but I will do my best to calm everything down while you figure that out.
Right. And
And
it's
that's
like that
tough.
that cycle that you were talking about, like, hey, let's help you like with these topical creams or pills, like that helps for you decrease your stress, that'll help your skin condition as well. And then that makes you more able to take on the other stresses in your life because you're not worried about the skin condition. And that's something that I wanted to bring up because I know, and we'll definitely I'm pretty sure we'll talk about stigma a lot when it comes to
Mhm.
skin diseases. But I do think that, and this happens with obviously mental illnesses, with other illnesses as well, but there's so much shame wrapped around like certain like conditions. I remember being 10 and being like, not knowing why, but knowing that I should be embarrassed about the dandruff. I just knew that it was something to be embarrassed about. No one told me like you should be embarrassed about that, but it was something that I didn't want. So I'm sure that a lot of people just like have this thing and they just want to hide it. Like it has to get really bad for them to go out to take time out of their super busy, stressful lives to go and see someone to take care of it. So yeah, I'm just like, do you see a lot of that, like embarrassment or sort of thinking, is it because I'm not washing properly? Like, there's just so many myths out there that's like dandruff is because you don't wash your hair, like all these other things.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. That's a great point. And you recognized it when you were 10. Right? And I think it does that much damage to you even when you're younger and you don't have so much pressure on yourself. And then when you're older, it just gets worse. I think it gets compounded over the years. And it's especially rough in minority communities where you have a stigma of being dirty. Right? We did this study, we're doing this research, we're putting out this research study now, and we interviewed hundreds and almost thousands of people about their bathing habits. And we asked Black people, Hispanic people, Asian people, white people. And we found that oftentimes the minorities, especially Black people, will wash themselves so much more and more frequently. And we wanted to know why that was. And it's not easy to ask that question, but we have to have that conversation at some point. And a lot of it is this built up stigma that there is dirtiness associated with minorities. And so when you are in a white dominated world, when you are in a high functioning society, you want to be clean and presentable and you want to be part of the norm. And there's so much pressure. And I think it's, we have incredible waves and movements right now that go against that and they promote diversity and colored skin and culture. And I think that is incredible. But when you are out there by yourself in the world, you feel completely by yourself. And when you have a skin condition and you have dandruff in your hair, or if you have eczema and you're flaking on your skin, you feel by yourself. You don't feel part of a movement at that time. And I think that's where it really comes down on you. And so we really do feel that. I have a lot of my Black patients who they clean their skin with alcohol. And yeah, yeah, that, and I don't even have that reaction anymore because it's at least 2 or 3 times a day where I have to convince my patient, you are not dirty. You are not dirty. And I don't even get into, why you would think that. It's just, you are not. I promise you, you are not dirtier than anybody else. You do not need to clean your skin of bacteria or anything else. You do not need to use alcohol. That just hurts. Nourish yourself, cherish yourself. Your skin is Black skin is actually extremely strong, extremely impressive. And the old saying, black don't crack. I mean, there's a reason, right? They have incredible skin. And so it really hurts to see that. And I think I've experienced it with, my own culture. I'm darker skin, and Indian culture has a huge stigma on darker versus lighter skin. And I know a lot of other cultures do as well,
So do
Asian
the
cultures,
Mexicans.
Mexicans. And so even I believe in Black community, there's not, I don't think as much variation in color in the Black community, but I think lighter skin is definitely acknowledged. And so there's so much that you have to deal with that is deep down when it comes to skin conditions in the minority community. And when you're a kid in the minority community and you have flaking skin, that you feel embarrassed and you don't even know why.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of that you can't control, and we have to start the conversation somewhere, and we're starting something now, and I think that's great. And you just work at it and you chip at it, and hopefully you save a lot of 10-year-old kids some pain.
Oh yeah, my heart sank when you said the rubbing, like they think they're dirty, but it did remind me of something funny that I saw on Twitter, which is people were going around asking like, do people wash their feet when they're in the shower? And
Mm.
mostly white people were saying, no, it's the soap, it comes down and then you're clean. And like mostly Black people were saying like, no, you take you scrub them. And it's kind of like that like white people think, I mean, obviously we're speaking in generalizations, but like, yeah, I'm in the shower and the soap washes off. Cool. But like the group of people who has to think more about that were like, no, we have to wash between the toes. And that was just like very funny, obviously, because Black people were roasting white people, and I thought that was very funny.
Yeah,
But
yeah,
like, you
it's
don't
like you're
watch, what
feeding them.
else do you not watch? Yeah, exactly. But
Right, right.
it does remind me of that, and I think there was also a debate about like how often do you change the rag or the, I forget the name for the, like the loofah, and like Black people were
Uh-huh.
also changing it out more often, and it's just a reflection of like exactly what you're talking about.
Yeah, yeah, it is. It brings up two thoughts. One, another thing we found in the they didn't have a study was that Black people, they often have a cultural washcloth, where if you go into a family's house, so said from our patients, that you have a bar of soap and then you have three washcloths, one for the dad, one for the mom, one for the kid. And that is their loofah. And you take the soap and you put the washcloth around it and then you scrub yourself. And that is so abrasive on the skin for whatever reason that was, many cultural and also I think stigmatic and stereotypical reasons. They felt the need to scrub their skin much more than maybe whites did.
Wow.
And there's a lot of conclusions that we can jump to, and I don't think they're as important as the fact that we we got to acknowledge those behaviors exist. We can't just keep hiding and saying everybody's the same, all skin colors the same. That's not true. It is not true, because there's not just the skin, it is everything that comes with it, having that skin. And I know you've encountered, I'm assuming you've encountered racism in its own walks, having immigrated from Mexico, and I have encountered it. I change colors throughout the year, and I get darker in the summer and I get lighter in the winter, and people treat me differently based on the time of year and based on my haircut, and based on where I am in the country. So everything, it comes together. And so when you talk about scrubbing yourself, it is such a difference. The other thing I think about is, I think this is such an interesting concept, is the glow. We talk Everyone loves to talk
Oh,
about the
wow.
glow,
The dewy, it's like
right?
the dewy
The
thing is
dewy.
in. The other day I looked like a glazed donut, truly. I was like, oh my God, like no. But
Yeah,
it's in, yeah.
the Dewey's in, right? Dewey's in, and Dewey's a great look. But if you are shiny in the Black community, you're often called greasy. And I have been told by older Black women, who are some of my favorite patients, because they will tell you whatever they're thinking, and they'll be like, "Oh, go wash your face. You look greasy." They don't tell me when they know that I'm a dermatologist and they're coming to see me as a patient. But in another walk of life, if I'm just walking around, that's what they think. And
Yeah.
but on that same day, a white person will tell me I look dewy.
Hmm.
And so I can't help but to think that there is some type of stigma that differentiates those
Right.
two.
Yeah. No, and for me, like to acknowledge my own privilege is like I am Mexican, like fairer skin. And especially when I just moved to the US and people would ask me like, what are you? That was a question I've never heard before. Because I grew up in Mexico, it's very homogenous or homogeneous. Don't know either. But we're basically everyone in Mexico is Mexican, and there's obviously racism there, especially towards like more indigenous looking people. But everyone's Mexican. And then you come here and it's like, what are you? I'm Irish and French and 5% Native American. And I would just be like, oh, I'm Mexican. And they'd be like, really? Like, but just Mexican? Like, I think they wanted me to say, like, oh, yeah, like I have a grandmother who came from Spain. Like, it was just like, you don't look Mexican to me. It's like, what do you think it looks like? So, yeah, there's just so many things that come with colorism and white supremacy. And I mean, in Mexico, even when babies are born and they look blondish, they're called güeritos. And it's like, oh, he's güerito, like so pretty. And then like a darker skinned baby comes, it's like, ooh, prietito. And it's like, people. Yeah, I like you hear it everywhere, and it's definitely something that it's not just an American issue for sure. And you talked about, yeah, it's not just
Hmm.
a
Hmm. Yeah, it's not just an American issue, and you wonder how much of it is though rooted in colonialism. And not just because we have Americans in Western culture now, is that there were Spanish and Catholics conquering the world back in the day, right? And there was a different ruling class. I know in India, the British came over and they ruled for quite some time. And the lighter skin you are, the more close to the ruling class you are. in appearance. And so
Yeah.
when your baby is born and they're very dark, you know that they're going to have a naturally harder life than when they're light, just by probability, because that is who is in charge. And so I think that translates over. I think less and less now, I would very much hope. And I think we're doing very well at diversifying and acknowledging differences. But
You're more optimistic than me. Okay. We have talked for a while and we did have a last segment, and like I'm sure we will talk a lot about this more in future episodes. But the last segment was to do a quick run through of my skincare routine. And we wanted to do this on the first episode so we could touch on some of the things that we'll talk about in more depth later on. Um, so yeah, I'll start off with my morning routine, and we'll talk a lot more about this because I'm not the only person who started adding shit to the routine, just being like, this this works. I don't know how, but I'm gonna put it on my face. So, yeah, with all the adjacent products that come with it. Like, to start off, I will say the silk pillowcase and the bamboo cloth towels that are advertised as being for babies. I use that on. Okay, so starting with that. And then so morning I do double cleansing. So first with a micellar water and then with a gentle foam cleanser. And then I put on a toner, a moisturizing toner, because when I first started, the first toner that I found had witch hazel in it, which I didn't realize was a thing that dries stuff out. But I was putting on my face, it was red and itchy, and I was like, it's working. And then my friend had to be like, no, if you're in pain, you should not do that. So that was it. Then I put on the vitamin C serum on most days, which I use a cold jade roller to slather that on. This is all waiting for things to dry out as they go. And then I put on moisturizer, and then I put on SPF. And then I put on SPF later on in the day. And if I'm gonna go outside, I put it again.
yeah,
So that's the first one. That's
that
the
is
morning routine.
that is a solid morning. That is
Yeah,
a
it takes
solid
a
morning.
while.
Yeah, huge support of the SPF. Huge
Yeah.
fan. Everything up till then, I think, is up for discussion. I think all
Okay.
that I have thoughts on. Some of that good, some of it bad. Some of it I have no idea. Some of it I'm very curious about, and I can't wait to discuss that. That is, um, oh, I have so many thoughts. That is
It's
great.
it's doing a lot. And also, I don't think this gets talked about enough because I Googled it when it was happening to me, and I had to go, like not the first two, it was like number 10 to figure it out. But there's a thing that when you put on so many products on your face, you start getting like layered products. Like, and then I try to put on makeup on top. It's like, what is this? What's happening to my face? I thought it was like falling off. It's like my skin was falling off, and then it's just like little balls of product. So apparently, like you can't do all the serums in one day. Oh, and this is for a regular day. So twice a week,
Okay.
after putting the toner on, I will use a derma roller on my face, which is a thing that's a rolly thingy with a bunch of tiny needles on it. Stainless steel needles that I will disinfect for like 15 minutes. And then I will roll it on my face. It hurts because you're stabbing your face with needles. And then I put on hyaluronic acid, which is an acid that is a serum that is similar to it's the serum step in the routine, but it's more moisturizing, I think. So that's why I put it on after I stab my face with needles. And then also once a week, I will shave my face, which is called dermaplaning in social media. They sell little dermaplaning tools, but they're literally just razors. They're
Hmm.
just face razors. And I started doing it because apparently it exfoliates. Oh, exfoliate. Sometimes I do a chemical exfoliant, and then sometimes the physical, and we'll talk about the ABHEs, BBCs, AAs,
All
because
the
I don't
letters.
know what they mean at all. I put it on my face. Yeah, apparently shaving your face is great at exfoliating, and it takes away like the little hairs, obviously. which I do think like make my face brighter. But it also lets the products reach the skin more efficiently. Who knows? So that's the morning.
Oh, right. That is the morning. Morning.
I forgot to add that part.
All
Okay.
right.
And then
Well, we got a lot to start with.
yeah,
Oh, let's not go into the night.
we don't go into the night.
Not yet. Let's start with the day. Let's start with the morning. Let's start with the
Okay.
morning. It's enough for one time. All right, we'll do that. We'll do that first. Okay, lots of thoughts. I'll write them down and we'll chat
Okay. For next episode?
next episode.
Okay, sounds good.
Oh yeah.
Okay. Last thing that we want to add is that we also want this podcast to be user generated. We would love to answer your questions as best we can, bring on guests with different types of expertise, and discuss topics you are interested in. So please email getintoyourskinpod@gmail.com with your questions, or DM us at our Instagram page at getintoyourskinpod. Okay, this is the end of the first episode, and we're super stoked about this and really appreciate you listening. If you enjoyed the podcast, please rate, review, and subscribe. I listen to a lot of podcasts, so that came out very naturally on whatever platform you listen to make sure you don't miss an episode of the Get Into Your Skin podcast. And follow us on Instagram. If you found this podcast episode helpful, you can share it with your friends, your parents, your Uber drivers, the people that you see waiting to cross the street, except don't do it because there's corona, put a mask on. But just share it on your Instagram. So do it on social media and don't catch COVID. All right. Bye.
Bye everyone. Listen to Isabel.